Hello, my friend. I am Katie Tayler, a certified child life specialist, and I am so thrilled to introduce the Ransome family to you today. You might already know or follow them as the Ransome fam on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all of the good things. But they are a young married couple, and their first child has end-stage kidney disease. And so they do so many days in the life, what happens here, how they get their meds packed, how they do dialysis and G-tube feed changes and all of these different things so that other families can see what they're going through and learn about the process. Because as you will learn, there is such a steep learning curve when you become a medical parent. Some of the things I walked away with today after speaking to the Ransome family was that when families or even yourself are disclosing the diagnosis or that something has happened with your child, it's good to be really specific about who you want to tell at first. Because the more people you tell, the more questions you'll get, and the more their processing of what they're hearing will impact how you process. So it's good to be very thoughtful about that. Second of all is that learning to advocate for your child is not always going to be comfortable. And Billy shares it's one of the most interesting stories I've heard in terms of advocating and the level at which he had to step up and intervene for what was happening with his son, and the breath of fresh air that comes once you actually do advocate and you do have someone listen to the best interest of your child and what that can feel like. And finally, one of the things that Billy shared also at the end that really stuck with me is this moment of pride that you can have for your kids for simply just existing. And I think it's so beautiful. So thank you so much to the Ransome family and Sully for letting me borrow your parents for a little bit of time. And I'm so glad and honored to share their conversation with you today. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. For those of you who are listening to the podcast, I'm looking at the most beautiful couple and they look cuddled up, and it's by default because they're sharing a microphone and earbud. But like, in my opinion, it's just super sweet. But I would love for you guys to introduce yourself to our listeners and just tell us a little bit about you and your family.
So my name is Taylor. This is my husband, Billy. We've been married now about 4 years. Close to 4 years. And we go by the Ransom fam on social media because we have a little guy named Sullivan that we call Sully as well. And he took us on a whirlwind about a year ago. He was born with a condition called posterior urethral valves. So PUV is kind of what everybody calls it because that's a mouthful of a term. And then when he was born, we had a couple different hospital stays, learned very quickly that he was in kidney failure. So for the last 150-ish days now, we've been doing dialysis in our home and walking him through transplant. And so on social media, that's a lot of what we share just because we found ourselves explaining it a lot and nobody really understood it. So basically that's what we do. We share about dialysis stuff. We kind of do fun family stuff as well, just because, we want to keep it lighthearted, show that there's joy amidst kind of the hard stuff that we walk through too.
Isn't it kind of amazing that we can walk through life not thinking about our kidneys and how important and vital they are? And then all of a sudden you get thrown into this world and it's like, oh my God, the kidneys are so important, require so much work. Did you guys have any kind of previous knowledge about the role of the kidneys or any kidney experience?
I had none, absolutely none.
Yeah, me
I
either.
didn't know what they did. I didn't know what they looked like.
Yeah, I remember we were sitting at one of our initial consultations and they kept talking about a nephrologist. And I'm like, whoa, can we hold up? Like, what does that word mean? And so finally somebody told me it was a kidney doctor. And I was like, oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense now. But yeah, they do so much. And it's such, I mean, it's so cool how this body is so interrelated. So, like, this system affects this system, affects this system. But then when one's not working, you realize very quickly, like, all the different things that it plays a role in.
Oh gosh, you hit the nail on the head with the medical terms that people in the hospital or on the care team use all the time. And it's like, wait, what does that mean? Anything from NPO, but nephrologist is a good one. Nephrology and kidneys don't sound anything the same. So how they came up with
No,
that, I don't know, but maybe they could clue us in.
I know.
Yeah,
It should have been like
seriously.
a kidnologist or something. I don't know.
Right? I know. Let's rebrand. Let's get the PR team for kidneys here, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, No, it's so true. And then you think about even breaking down the role of a kidney. Parents and can start to understand and learn in very simple terms, and then kids have to understand as I'm sure Sully becomes older and you start talking about things. It's breaking it down even more.
Yeah.
Well, walk us from the kind of beginning of your story and finding out that something was going on with Sully's kidneys.
Yeah, it was actually so our 20-week anatomy scan. No clue of anything until that point. And Billy always laughs because we had planned a road trip. So we were going on vacation right after the
Like
20-week
we went
scan.
to the 20-week scan and the car was packed.
Yeah.
The car
So
was
then
packed.
once it was done, we got in, we were like, let's go.
Yeah. And so that kind of shows like just our naiveness. Like we didn't think anything was going to go wrong, obviously. And pretty quickly into the trip, we get a call and they basically, well, we saw the results on my chart
Yeah.
first. We saw the results and then we called because the first thing we just Googled this term because we don't know what posterior urethral valves. I had no idea like what that meant. And so one of the first articles we read talked about how it was a more fatal diagnosis than you once thought. And so all of a sudden we're in this tailwind of trying to understand what this means. They can't confirm it, so they have to do other ultrasounds. And so they told us to still go on our vacation, which kind of, I don't know,
It
kind of
was
ruined
awful.
the vacation.
Yeah, it was terrible.
And then we came back and had to meet with like maternal fetal medicine and do a bunch of ultrasounds. And they gave us a 50-50 chance for Sully to even survive through pregnancy. And so we had lots of monitoring. And then immediately afterwards, he was born at 34 weeks. So we knew we'd have a NICU stay. We knew there were some potential surgeries that could happen, but they didn't really know the extent of the kidney damage until he was born. And that's kind of what they had warned us of, like, we'll see, because they had said the placenta in utero can act a lot as like a dialysis unit, which is super cool. But basically, so the urine was trapped inside of him, stayed in his kidneys, and he couldn't pee was the main like issue. So once he was born, they had to figure out, okay, how do we get the pee out of his body? And then since the kidneys never developed normally, how do we, do the role of the kidneys instead of him doing it himself? So he had a surgery at 18 days old that created little holes so that he could leak urine, a vesicostomy and a ureterostomy. And then he actually avoided dialysis for 9 months, but we did lab draws very frequently until we finally started dialysis just, a couple 5 months ago.
Yeah, 5 months.
Yeah.
150 days.
Wow. Wow. Oh gosh, dialysis is such a labor intensive parent sport for sure. Let's go back to kind of finding out the diagnosis. And it's so weird. Like you're expected to leave the appointments and just go live life like everything is normal and anything is but normal to you. How did you guys either react similarly or different when it came to processing the diagnosis and sharing with friends or sharing with family? How did it look for you?
I don't know like what the system is for this, but I think it's kind of crazy that they send the results without calling you, because
Yeah.
like we got those results and we're like, whoa, like this could be really, really bad. So then we're like panicking, and then
Right.
we didn't even get a hold of him until the next day, right?
No, I think it was a couple hours. It's kind of a blur, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I don't.
Yeah, I'm
It was,
sure. Shock.
Yeah.
yeah, but it was really hard to tell our family.
Yeah.
No one in our family's ever really gone through anything similar. Most pregnancies went very, very well.
Yeah.
In
Like
fact, your mom.
my mom went into labor on every single one of her due dates, like
Oh,
textbook
wow.
pregnancy.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And so I was like, oh man, how do I explain this thing that I don't fully understand yet? And just like the chances of it. And so I think we both wanted to start with a small circle of people that we really trusted to tell. So it
Yeah.
was like both of our parents and our pastors, I think, was who we had initially told. And then I think we waited to learn a little bit more before we like spread the news more. Because we had like this initial kind of diagnosis and then 4 weeks until like the confirmation ultrasound. And so in
Got it.
those 4 weeks, we were just kind of like, how do we haven't even sat down with a doctor yet to fully understand this. We're just using Dr. Google, which,
Right.
And Facebook
It's a
groups,
blessing and a curse.
yeah.
Yeah. And the Facebook groups were really good and really bad
Yeah.
because
Too much
it
information
wasn't
right away.
confirmed yet. So we were only looking for the stories that were like, oh, well, we went in and they actually said he didn't have it. And so we were like, oh, that's
Right.
awesome. So then when we went into the 4-week appointment, we were like, there's no way he's got it. And then
Yeah.
immediately the doctor walked in and was like, yeah, it's confirmed.
Yeah. And I feel like Billy and I are actually very similar in the way we process things, which is helpful. Because like we both need to take a step back before we like bring other people into it.
Yeah, you cry more than
I cry more than him. he's like, we process it like similarly. And so we've always been really good about being on the same team, I feel like, which has been just a big blessing, right? To be able to walk through it with somebody who like has your best interest in mind. But it was definitely hard. Like, and we both worked full time at the time. So I worked at an elementary school and he did like household construction type stuff. And we were also renovating a house we had just bought. So it was just like there were so many other things going on. And I felt like I could never leave like thinking about it because I was pregnant, right? Like baby's
Right.
still in me. I'm feeling him move. I'm feeling all these things. But I'm at work and just kind of like living life. It was such a weird season in that way too. And then he would come home and like, are you feeling him kick today? Like, are we, still good? Just like these really
Right.
Because that's kind of all they told us was like, well,
questions.
just check for kicking. It's
Yeah.
like, that's the
Yeah.
worst. It's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like, Billy's like, I can't help with that.
Yeah. Just totally
you-
hopeless.
I was thinking about, the people you tell and being very intentional at the beginning because you're learning a lot about yourself. And then you realize the more people you tell, the more questions you get. And the more questions you get that you don't have answers to, it can feel messy and it can feel overwhelming. So it's that immediate kind of circle of trust and people who love your baby just as much as you do, your family, and they're worried about you, right? They want you to be taken care of, and so many different dynamics to sharing.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's so true. You get so many more questions the more you share things. That's why we started the social media, honestly, is because we were explaining ourselves like a million times over.
Yeah.
And that itself was exhausting. It was like, I don't even think about like the things that we go through now because it's our normal. But then when I'm
Right.
explaining it, like every time I see somebody in public, it's pretty
Totally.
challenging. And so we just made a place and it was like, if you have questions about that side of our lives, like this is a
Go do this.
good resource for you. And
Yeah.
it's worked so far for us. Yeah.
I've heard parents say that about this podcast too. Because we kind of go through it. And then if somebody, because with well-meaning, you want to share with parents who are going through, but then you kind of have to go back and relive it yourself. So when you can send them to your YouTube or send them to your podcast or whatever it may be, it can be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes it's really therapeutic though to like remember all that you have gone through because I feel like there are times when we look at each other and like, how did we get here? And it's
Yeah.
you think through all the steps and the things that you've overcome and cool testimony and story to be able to share.
Yeah. It's, you guys are incredibly um, courageous and generous with what you share. And I've seen it make a difference in my own friend and other parents. And when other parents share it, it's like this whole connection, this whole group of people you didn't know you were going to be a part of. But it's just, it can be really life changing to know that you're in a community and that you're not going through it alone. Let's move a little bit into kind of the medical stuff for you guys. what worked the best? Like, or who took on what role, or what did you really like that a care team member did that was like, oh, okay, now I feel like safe. I feel like I can process. I feel like I can learn it. And maybe what didn't go so well.
Well, I mean, we can probably start with the 2-week training.
Yeah, even before that though, we had when we were in the NICU at
Oh, I guess,
Seattle
there's life
Children's.
before dialysis.
Yeah,
I forgot.
there was a whole lot of learning there. There was one specific doctor that we had, and I will never forget her because she came into our NICU room and she sat down with us for an hour and basically gave like a crash course in kidneys. Dr. Nguyen, remember her?
Oh, yeah.
And she ended up being our, primary nephrologist until we had, to switch to a dialysis doctor. And she was like the best. Like, I feel like she has a calling to be a teacher in her life as well, because she drew us diagrams and she gave us like little packets that we could go home and read. And we were just at that phase where like we wanted to understand it, especially at the beginning. And so I feel like she was like key for a long time. And she actually is like a professor, I think, too. Because that's kind of Seattle Children's is one of those teaching hospitals. So we get a lot of like professor and doctors. And so she was really big. And then I think next was like we did a 2-week intensive course. You want to talk about that?
It was pretty fun, actually. I mean, it was insane, but the nursing staff that we had was really great. And I was very confident after those 2 weeks that we could do it.
Yeah, they made us. So basically, we would go in. We had like a manual that was like thick. We had to like literally go through word for word and ask questions as we went. And then they made us set up the dialysis machine at least probably twice a day, every time we were there. And so by the end of these 2 weeks of doing this, like again and again and again, you started to feel really comfortable.
Yeah.
And then they gave us like sheets of phone numbers that were really helpful too if we had questions. And I feel like we have called those numbers so many times just to make sure that like the bases are covered.
I'm just imagining like those papers like crinkled and like coffee spilled on them, and like you've used those so much.
Sacred papers. I have a binder in Sully's closet, and it's like I just keep everything in there that we need. But we have like how to hand wash, how to do all these things. And there's posters like in our house so that we have these things just like around us, so that for one, we don't become like complacent and forget some of the steps. But for two, it's just like, okay, yeah, this is how you do it, so we can remember them.
And now a word from our wonderful sponsors who help make this podcast possible. Are you or a loved one navigating the world of tube feeding? We're excited to be partnering with Nestle Health Science to share their incredible mytubefeeding.com website, your go-to online resource for valuable information and support. Whether you're a patient or caregiver, mytubefeeding.com offers a wealth of resources to help you on your tube feeding journey. We're proud to mention the Peptamen and Complete brands as exceptional tube feeding products. Peptamen provides specialized complete nutrition for patients with gastrointestinal intolerance, while Complete offers wholesome nutrition for those seeking real fruit and vegetable ingredients and plant-based options. These brands have been used by healthcare professionals for decades, showing nutritional benefits for patients. But don't just take our word for it. One of our own, a mom who works at Child Life on Call, discovered mytubefeeding.com organically through her own tube feeding experience with her son. She found the support and information she needed to navigate the challenges of tube feeding. And now we invite you to do the same. Visit mytubefeeding.com/childlifeoncall today to explore a wealth of resources, including educational articles, videos, and community forums. Gain insights from experts in the field, connect with others who understand your journey, and find the support you deserve. Remember, you're not alone in this, and our partner, Nestle Health Science, is here to empower you with knowledge and provide a supportive community every step of the way. We hope mytubefeeding.com/childlifeoncall will be a valuable resource for you and your loved ones. I'm so curious about this 2-week course. So were you with other parents at the time who watched Sully? Like, how all did it go?
That was a tricky part, was finding childcare for Sully. So he couldn't be there. So for the first little part, he was inpatient because it was right after he got his dialysis catheter placed surgically. And so he had to heal a little while in the hospital. So we would have like my mom would come and stay with him in the hospital room, or my dad or my sister. And then we would go downstairs basically to this training, and it was just us two and a dialysis nurse. And the nurse switched a couple times, but then it got really tricky because Sully was discharged. So he went home, and we live like an hour, hour and a half from the hospital,
Oh,
pending
wow.
traffic.
And he's still recovering from
Yeah,
surgery.
he's recovering from surgery, and we have to find somebody to watch him recovering
while doing all his
Right.
meds and his G-tube and
Yeah,
all that kind of
like
stuff.
there's already some complicated things, and then you have the
Right.
surgery, and so then we're putting a lot of trust, right? Luckily, we trust my parents a lot. We moved in with them during this process just because we knew we needed more help, and so they've really like taken it on to learn as much as they can. So we were like, okay, we have people, but I can see how that would be very challenging for some families. Like your child just had
Oh,
surgery, but you can't be with your child. Interesting.
absolutely. Well, and
Well,
the
not all families are
grandparent
gonna have
role.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then we were driving to Seattle, and the course was like 9 to 5 basically every day for 2 weeks, which it was like a lot to take in.
Yeah.
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 I feel like we left and our brains were numb.
Oh, and during the training, I also had to have a root canal.
Oh yeah. That,
Oh,
life doesn't stop.
So the first few days,
no.
I was just in agony. And then eventually Taylor's like, I booked you an appointment for an emergency dentist.
We just needed to get it handled. So
Oh, gosh. That sounds like an emotional root canal as well.
yeah. And it was so crazy too, because the room they did training in was like this little like hole in the wall closet, like no windows, nothing. So you're just stuck in this room with like one table, the cycler, the dialysis machine, and then like the textbook.
Yeah.
So it was just like it was intense.
How long did it take you all, or did it not take any time at all for you to kind of come into this role of maybe having grieved what you thought life was going to be like with your new baby and what it is now? And I still kind of find myself like, just any new transition or routine that you have, there's this learning curve of like acceptance. This is what it is now, and this is how we move forward. What was that journey like for you?
We were like totally on that path of like, get a good job, get a house on land, have a perfect little baby, and then plan out how long we want between kids,
like age
and
gaps, all those different things.
like we were just caught up in that. And when this happened, I mean, it took a while for us to realize what it meant for those dreams. And honestly, what I've learned through this is that those dreams, it's not that we've given up on them, it's that we just have new dreams. Like I'm okay with not ever having those.
Yeah.
But
it was a real priority shift, and I feel like that was the hardest part of it, right? Like because we're both kind of young, so we had to grow up a bit through this as well, just understanding like you can't plan some of these things, like they're not in your hands or in your control. And so I think it actually probably took me longer than it took Billy. He was pretty good about it, but there is something really beautiful when you have a child of like just the joy that that child has. And so I feel like as Sully grew into his personality, I was like, wait, this isn't bad. Like this is still a really beautiful life that we get to live with this kid that we dreamed and prayed for. And those other things will come, right? Like one day we will move out again, and that will be a great day.
Right.
And one day we hope to have another baby, and that will also be a great day, regardless of what that looks like. But there was this poem that I read the other day, and I think it's kind of a popular one in the medical world of like, you think you're going to Italy and you end up in Holland. And so it's like, it's not any less beautiful. It's just a lot different. And so you have to just take that time to just kind of see that it's different and let those dreams kind of go away, but replace them. Like, don't give up hope on still building a life that you love and one that's beautiful, even if it's a little different. And Sully really helps. Like everybody's obsessed with their child, and we're no different. We think he's pretty awesome, and so that's just it's fun for us to even get to be parents, and so we'll never, not be thankful for that.
Well, it's been really fun too, living with your parents.
Yeah, it's funny.
Like they love him so much.
Did they pay you to say that?
No.
No. Yeah, my dad like lives for babies. Like I remember growing up, I even felt sad that like I was growing up because I knew he loved babies so much, and he was like, "Don't feel that way. Like, I love you now." So, but he gets home from work and he has like 20 or 30 minutes before Sully goes to sleep, And he's like, this baby is mine right now.
That's his dedicated time. He like pushes him around on his bike, dips his feet in the hot tub.
Yeah.
Does everything he can.
And then my mom was like, never worry about laundry. We'll do your laundry for you. So like, there's been really like tangible ways that they've really helped us. And we're beyond blessed to have that.
She loves Sully too. She doesn't just love laundry. They love him a lot.
It makes you feel like what I see, and it sounds like in your parents, and then in my parents too, is like what I want to be like when I become a grandparent, and how you want to give back to your family, and how important that little circle, whether it's your chosen family or the family that you are, blessed to be married into, or it's blood, but how important that is.
Yeah, and your dad has kind of been my person when I need, like, because there was a lot of big decisions made, like selling a house, quitting our jobs, moving in with him and your mom. And every single one of those decisions, I wanted to make sure I was doing what he would do.
Yeah, he's a really good mentor that way.
Yeah.
Oh, what an incredible testimony to family and how life-changing that can be.
Yeah, we need each other.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
I don't know how some of these families do it without family.
Well, and we've been reminded of that again because my sister just had a premature baby like 2 weeks ago, like at 29 weeks. And so immediately again, it was like, hey, family's like stepping in, here we go.
Right.
So it's really one of those things that like, I feel like is one of our big values, like in our family is like, we want to be very family oriented and like, we're doing this together. And so like, even when Sully has inpatient stays, like we move mountains to make sure that we can all be there with him, you know, and all those different things. It's just something that we really value.
He's so loved.
Oh yeah.
Very much so.
I just have a couple more questions. I would love to hear about how both of you have stepped into your advocating role for Sully and for yourself when it comes to healthcare. Oh, I can't wait. I feel like there's a story there.
There's a great story.
Okay, tell me.
A real great introduction.
I am not a confrontational person at all. I avoid, like, you would never guess. And we were at, oh man, how do we say this?
So when Sully was born, we were at like a general hospital, not a children's hospital.
Because they told us they could handle it.
And it became very clear very quickly that so Billy's like watching all of this happen because we're staying in their NICU trying to understand all these things. And like things are just getting worse and nobody's telling us anything. So like at this point, we didn't even know if he was like gonna live.
We didn't know if he was doing good or bad. And I was trying to get the urologist to just show up. Like I kept calling him and calling him.
They weren't seeing us.
And then eventually he answered the phone and I said, like, is he gonna live? And like obviously he can't tell me yes or no, but he said, well, it's not looking good.
And so immediately we're like, we need another opinion. Like,
and I asked him, I was like, well, what are we gonna do? And he's like, well, we just have to wait until he's big enough to have the surgery to ablate the valve that's in his urethra so that way he can pee. And I'm like, there's got to be another way. Like, you're just going to sit here and hope.
Yeah, it felt really hopeless when we were at that hospital. And so Billy, he's like, okay, I'm finding us a children's hospital. We're doing all these things. But then to get this hospital to let us leave, that was where I feel like Billy had to step into the advocating.
I felt like I was in prison. Like I couldn't escape. Like I talked to nurses and then they'd bring in the nurse practitioner and then they'd bring in the floor doctor. And even though they all admitted that they didn't know what they were doing because they'd never seen it before, the head floor doctor kept telling me, if it was my kid, I wouldn't take him to children's. And I was like, that's terrible to say. Like, don't bring your family in on this.
Yeah.
Unless you're telling me exactly what I want to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Unless it's an encouraging thing. Don't
right.
What I'm trying to do here.
Yeah, but then I was kind of.
You're angry.
I was angry because no one was listening to me, and Sully was getting worse. All his numbers were trending in the wrong direction. So then I kind of just said, like, I don't care what you say. Like, we're gonna leave, and whether it's either you or I'm gonna go find someone else to sign a paper. And he
stormed out of our
stormed
hospital
out of the room. He said, fine, and walked out of the room. And then a nurse actually followed him and said, are you going to leave the room like that? Like, that's very unprofessional. So then he came back in and took off his mask, which like,
this was COVID time here,
like it didn't even make sense. Like, I don't know what everyone's opinion is on masks, but like the hospitals,
they were supposed to wear it.
Everyone she had to sleep in a mask the first night. Like, it was crazy.
Oh, gosh.
But
yeah.
He comes in and like he tries to like get on our level or something, and he just like sits down and takes off his mask, and he's like, well, I want you guys to leave because we need more beds, but
I think the best care is here.
Yeah.
And Billy basically at this point just said, we're leaving. So let's make a plan for how we're leaving.
Yeah.
And let's do it. And then they were like, well, you know, we don't think your case is like serious enough for the children's hospital to accept it. And we'll make the call, but there's no guarantees that you'll get out of here in the next month. And so they make the call, and children's took us that day. Like, it was, and we got there and they're like, we've been waiting for you, reviewing your case. And so
they were like, we've been wondering if you were going to come.
Yeah, they knew our family already. And it was such a breath of fresh air. And I don't know that I've ever been more proud of Billy for like stepping up, because I'm really postpartum. Like, I'm emotional, trying to just, you know, make it through this. And then he's the one that like took on kind of this abrasive doctor and was like, no, like, I know what's best for my family, and this is what we're going to do. And so that was his introduction into it.
Day one.
Kind of, it was pretty rough. It was like, we need to fight for this kid. Like, we were introduced to that very quickly. And so luckily the care team at the next hospital was very attentive. And I mean, they are a children's hospital, so they'd seen this before. And so I had a doctor come in and he said, you know, I'm not going to lie to you, there are issues here, but we have solutions. And just like hearing that, like we wept. We were like, there's a solution, you know, like there's something that we can do. And so we very quickly learned like there's a lot more that goes into taking care of a kid with this than just like being at the hospital, right? And so now it's in terms of like managing the home care solutions and managing prescriptions and the different insurances, like all of those kinds of things. It's a constant thing. I feel like even yesterday we got a call about, because Sully can be on Medicare because babies with end stage renal failure qualify for Medicare. But then it's so rare that nobody has ever experienced this. And so then we're meeting with like brokers trying to understand like, how does Medicare work, because we've never dealt with Medicare.
So confusing.
And then things randomly switched, and now there's co-pays, and it's like, what is going on?
So there's like 5 phone calls waiting for us that we're gonna, you know, set aside some time and just try and figure this out again. But just to get the care that you want your child to get is like sometimes quite the advocating process. Yeah.
Well, that's incredibly impressive. And it's like you got that Papa Bear mode, like as soon as you became a dad and you were ready. And I think it's an important story to tell. And so I'm glad that you shared it, because you do have a choice when it comes to choosing your care team. And oftentimes you feel like you're stuck, and sometimes they even make you feel stuck, right? Like they did for you. But you can find a team that wants to help care for your child, and it's work and it can be difficult conversations, but ultimately it's worth being able to take a deep breath and, like you guys said, sleep at night.
Yeah. And it was instant gratification, because when we got there, so I hadn't seen the urologist or the nephrologist at the general hospital in days. And we got there, and in the first night, there was 6 doctors that came.
Wow.
And they were the ones changing out his catheters, whereas at the other place, it was like nurses that
had never done it
they'd
before.
Even said, we've never placed a catheter on a baby.
And so it was just, it was night.
And he had already had 1 UTI from it not being sterile. And and even just watching the doctor change the catheter, like at one point he had all the sterile stuff on, and he touched something, and then he was like, oh, this hand's contaminated, and then he switched to doing with one hand and having someone else help. So I was like, this guy obviously cares.
It was like immediately trust, like because at the other hospital, I would say we averaged like 2-3 hours of sleep a night, because we were just keeping an eye on everything. And then we got to the hospital, and like even just like the first impression that night, we slept like 9 hours. We were like,
good.
Like new people again.
Oh, and no one can function on little sleep, especially when you're in a traumatic situation.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I would love to kind of close our conversation just hearing a little bit about maybe some of the things y'all have learned about yourself since becoming Sully's mom and Sully's dad, and maybe something you didn't know about yourself before.
That's a good question. That's a deep one.
Hmm.
It's my second favorite. My second
Yeah.
favorite question.
I feel like discipline is a really big thing that I feel like we've both grown into through this process and like just had to learn. And it's, I mean, in like our religious sense, it's like a fruit of the spirit. And so it's one of those things where it was like having to like live in that every single day of like, this is the time for medicine. This is the time for dialysis. This is for all of that. Like I've learned that we can do that, which is
Yeah.
really just like it's not an easy lesson to learn, but it was something that like it's cool. And I feel like that can apply to so many other areas of life, like taking our own health seriously and doing things like that. Like that discipline was huge. And then also just that like you can go through a really hard thing and not become bitter. Because I think for me, the hardest part at first was in our church, there was 9 other babies born within like 6 months of Sully.
Mm,
And so I'm just watching, all these other journeys unfold and having a baby is never easy. Like there's so much work that goes into it, but learning not to compare and not to just like let myself become jaded that life became the way it did for me in those instances. Like there was a lot more strength and compassion in myself than I think I thought I had before this experience. Yeah. What would you say for yourself? I'm
Oh
curious.
man, I'd say the discipline thing's huge
Hmm.
because I'm a procrastinator through and through. Through college, I was writing papers the night they were
Yeah.
due, and just kind of how I always was. But this is, and I never wanted to be like that. That's the
Yeah.
thing, and I just never really pushed myself. But this, you don't really have an option.
Hmm.
You at 6 p.m. every night we head upstairs, and it's going to take 2 hours,
Yeah.
and just learning how to step in for you
Yeah.
when you don't want to do something, or I mean, vice versa.
Yeah. Both ways.
Like just I don't know, generosity with your time and efforts and
Hmm.
sleep schedule. And I also learned that I'm very soft. I did not know I was a soft person.
You're such a softie.
I never thought that I could just like hold my son and just look at him and cry. Like I never, I never thought in a million years that would be what I'm like. But
Yeah.
now I just want like 10 kids and
Oh my
I just
gosh,
want
he
to
wants
spend
so many
every,
babies.
I just want to spend like every
that
moment.
is so awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
M- My last favorite question is, what do you love the most about being Sally's mom and dad? Like, what's the most fun parts of watching him grow?
Hmm. There's so many. I feel like what has been the most like rewarding for me is like watching his personality bloom
Mm.
because I mean everybody always talks about the newborn stage and yes, it's really nice because like you have a snuggly baby and all this. But for me, like that 9 month to a year and beyond has been so fun to like watch his little brain turn on. And
Yeah.
like now he mimics things we do. And like if you go, oh, he goes, oh, back to you. And just like seeing how like ceaseless his joy is and he has no idea like all these hard things that he's been through and one day we'll cross that bridge of having to walk him through what these things mean but just to see that like regardless of the circumstance like he's so happy
Mm.
and that like I love getting to be the mom of that like just to
Mm.
see like he's such a reminder for me even it's so cool.
Yeah.
I think,
You're just gonna be silly, isn't
no, no.
it?
I, it's just like so easy to be proud of already.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was a fear that I had when having kids. Is like, is my kid gonna be one of those kids that like just
Mm.
cause trouble? And obviously he's young,
He's gonna
but
cause
like,
some.
I mean, the blessing that he's been to people already, and like how
Yeah.
people just look at like people will stop us in the grocery store and be like, his eyes, wow, his eyes are beautiful,
Yeah.
and and then he just smiles at them, and like I know
He's
that he's gonna be a good
he's just
kid.
gonna be a good kid. Yeah. He's really easy to love. And that has been so fun to be his parents, like through that. And he's kind of like we always are trying to find the perfect word to describe him. It's like bashful, mischievous, charming. Like
Yeah. Oh, I
you're
like that.
yeah, you're around him and he gives you that like little smile and you're like, oh, you know what you're doing.
Or like he's reaching for the outlet and you're like, Sully, and he looks at you and smiles. Like that. He knows what he's doing.
It's just so fun.
What a cutie. I love what you said about that you are already so proud of him. And I feel like in the context, we think like, oh, we're proud when they get a job or they grow up or they get an A on their test, but just their existence can make us proud, which is such an incredible thing to realize.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. I don't ever want him to move out.
I know. We're like, you don't have to leave our house.
You just make a compound. You just keep adding on to the house. It'll be great with your 10 kids.
Exactly. Yeah, 10 of them.
Well, you guys mentioned at the beginning how you like to share some of the day-to-day routine things that happen with having a kid on dialysis. Where can people follow you and find you, and what will they see?
Yeah, we have lots of different things. So really YouTube is probably the best if you want to see like more of the dialysis type routines because we do the long form videos over there. And that's where we've shared like his birth story and different things like that. Instagram is more of our day by day. TikTok, Facebook kind of post from what Instagram does. So if I were to pick two, I'd say Instagram and YouTube are probably your best bet.
Yeah, TikTok and Instagram have the exact same videos, so you don't need to go on.
Okay. Yeah. We need to do a side strategy talk about that so y'all can help me with that because I'm just reposting all of everything. I hope that's okay.
Yeah,
we're learning.
I'm really.
We started like 4 months ago, and I feel like he's been researching his little brain.
I'm sure.
Things out. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for your time, and thank your mom for hanging out with Sully so that we can have this conversation. And I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time. It's been so fun.
Thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists. Parents, we've got a starter kit for you. And clinicians, we even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that. And I will see you again here next week.